Please stand and join me in the pledge. Thank you. I
pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you all. Our workshop for June the 9th. And we will start with the report. Mr. Bartley.
Yeah, so Amanda and Cindy are here from AIRS. If it's engineering or I don't know what's after AIRS.
Yeah, AIRS is a engineering and planning firm, and so we have the DEQ.
Yeah, I'm with Brownfield's program
Okay,
in Cheyenne.
so you have kind of some information for the board to hear about.
We have a draft.
Yeah.
So, and what we hope is to get some feedback now or later, either is fine,
Yeah.
so.
Perfect,
We can jump in.
okay, perfect,
Okay,
you're ready.
all right, so I'm just gonna go ahead and introduce, the program. And so it's, the state partnership for urban and rural redevelopment. And, what we are doing, and we're funded by several, grant efforts. But what we're doing across the state is, a variety of, things like, urban and rural planning, area-wide planning. We can do, asbestos and lead-based paint surveys for buildings. Other, reuse, revitalization, roadmap, type grant pursuit information for people. Economic analysis, which is pretty useful for redevelopment purposes, what Amanda has done in draft form, because we're seeking feedback, is to give some ideas on directions for the former Wheatland High School, junior high school. And so what we did was we came up and we took a tour of the building. I guess the MEP, the mechanical, electrical, and plumbing folks were here. We can send a structural engineer to take a look at the integrity of the building as well. As you guys consider keeping, reusing, demolishing the building, whatever your goal is. So we just wanted to present that report and take some questions. If you guys have thoughts on that.
The next slide, please.
Yeah, and that's just the information for our program. Go for it.
Okay, cool. So, my firm, Ayers and Associates, is under contract with the DEQ to do these kinds of studies for jurisdictions throughout Wyoming. And so we have a unique scope for each project, and I wanted to just run through what we've been asked to do here. We first came out and had an initial meeting in our tour in March. I met with a couple of you, and tonight is our second time here, and again, tonight's draft findings. I'm the one with my colleagues who is writing the report, so what I want is some feedback before. I don't want to, go down a path and write an enormous report for you all to say, no thanks,
Right. We wanna make sure that it's something that's usable. It's not just a paper exercise, that you get a deliverable that you can use. And so we truly do want to hear some thoughts and some guidance and direction from you.
And so I'll jump into it in a minute, but we've done we've laid out a couple of scenarios, and again, big disclaimer, I'm not an expert in your community or your school. I wanna know what you guys want. We're just trying to bring a impartial outside opinion to the situation. So the scope involves an environmental review, so we have environmental scientists who specialize in asbestos and lead, and so they reviewed some reports that have already been done and have summarized those. And then, like Cindy said, we had a mechanical, electrical, and plumbing engineer come with us on March 10th when we were here, and we have laid out his findings because they'll influence what you want to do with the building. We are in the middle of the economic and financial analysis, which has a lot to do with which scenario you pick. But we want to present you with some potential redevelopment opportunities and considerations, and then ultimately we'll end with grant opportunities potentially, and maybe a few illustrations of what could become of the school.
Hey, Ryan, no one switched off.
While he's fixing that, I have a question.
Oh, sure.
So these slides, will they be available to us or? I don't know.
Cindy took this validation.
Oh, well, I'm on nights, I might have it.
Okay, that's fine, the answer is yes.
Yes.
Either way.
Thank you, sorry.
You may have it, we can give it to you.
Okay, sorry, I have not looked.
Sure, yeah, no big deal. Okay, can we go all the way to the site overview one? Okay, I am sure that you all know this, but just to make sure everybody's on the same page, it's our understanding the school was originally built in 1927 as a grade school. You know what it is, that it's two-story and has a main gymnasium, and that it evolved into a junior high. Our research told us that the addition was done in the 1950s, a second addition in 1977, and then the use as a school was discontinued in 2002, but we know from our tour, and you know, that there's the daycare in there, the Piccadilly Play School, and gym functions and theater storage. And so it remains partially active with those functions. Next slide. This is just a quick overview of the building, and I will need to double check this with John, but what we were trying to calculate here is how much of the school is being used right now, because, you know, it's easy to assume that, you know, it's vacant, but it's not vacant, it's got the school and the storage, and so by our rough calculations, we came up with that 61% of the first floor is occupied, and that's 47.5% of the whole building currently has some use in it. Next slide.
Does that sound about right?
Does that feel right?
A little bit more than half the building's in use, ish?
I mean, the gym is a big one, and
Gym, wrestling room,
Right.
LA, storage.
Yeah.
But that whole front is not, so yeah.
You've had two asbestos surveys done of the school. The first one was a limited test after some water damage, and they found no asbestos at that point, but another survey was done in 2023, and at that point they took 72 samples, and 10 of them came back with asbestos, and it was in the floor tiles, the pipe insulation, drywall, plaster, tape, scattered about. So the big point about that is asbestos remediation will have to be done before demolition.
Or renovation for that
Or
matter, no
renovation,
matter what
yeah.
happens, it's gotta be done.
It's a major factor.
Yeah.
Lead was not tested, and also only materials that were potentially gonna be disturbed by a remodeling at that time that was proposed were tested, so it's not a fully tested building.
Comprehensive, you know, every room, every pipe wrap, the boilers, whatever, I don't, it doesn't appear that it was a comprehensive study, which would probably be a good thing to have at some point.
Right, we just tested the Laramie Civic and did 400 samples so by order of magnitude.
And I don't know how many thousands of lead samples, so,
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay, oh, we lost her.
Yeah, just give me 1 second, sorry.
No problem.
No worries.
Got it.
Okay, yeah, next slide then. Okay, for the mechanical and electrical findings, I'm just gonna summarize them because I'm no expert in this area, but that basically our understanding is that it's functional for the current uses that you have. I mean, of course, if you expanded the uses, you're gonna need to enhance some of the mechanicals. For instance, electrical would need a load analysis depending on what the future use is. The plumbing are adequate is adequate for the current uses. The fixtures and stuff, not so nice. But there were several issues just noted in some of the conditions of things. So next slide. So functional, I guess the message is functional but not in best condition. We looked at demographics because whatever use that if you decide to renovate the school and do something with it, obviously, you know, your growth and job prospects are gonna influence what are the viable uses. And, you know, you guys know this from living here, you have a population that's declining a little bit and it's aging. Housing affordability is an issue like it is everywhere right now, but all of that could change too if you have the rare earth extraction sites come in. So that's kind of a wild card that you have here. Next slide. We also took a quick look at the zoning because it's going to affect whatever future use you might have in there if you opt for renovation, or if you opt for demolition and expect and think that something might come in to replace it. The zoning is going to be a factor. So it's zoned for residential uses. You would expect, primarily the zoning districts is intended for single family homes. However, you can have other things. Of course, you can, in most, residential neighborhoods, you can have parks and home occupations, but with a special use permit, you can have schools, churches, a community center. There must be an existing special use permit because
Childcare.
the childcare is in there, exactly. You can have government buildings, healthcare facilities, and rooming houses. The one thing that's missing from here is commercial uses, so you would need a rezoning if the future vision was for some sort of commercial enterprise. Next slide.
Would that include like office space?
I'd have to go back and look at their actual code, but I think usually with commercial, they're thinking of things where people are coming and going and parking is an
Sure.
issue and stuff, so.
I was on planning and zoning and it does.
Oh, okay.
It does affect that we would have to change or they'd have to be rezoned for
For office
business,
too?
commercial.
Business, commercial office.
Yeah, there's
Okay.
a certain phase for that it would have to be rezoned too, but
Okay.
could be done, it's
yeah.
just one of those things that have to go through the process.
Right. Okay. So the way we broke this down to start to analyze the building is, of course, you can do demolition and you could just sit on the site or you could sell it. You could do demolition and really try to promote new development and be a partner in that. And a lot of schools do request for proposals for developers to come in and deal with empty lots. Or the bigger one is to do an adaptive reuse. And of course, all of this kind of depends on the community's values. So when we go through the math, you'll see the math for demoing it is pretty simple, but there is the potential to generate revenue with a renovation, and you have the issue that you have uses in there now. So that's a factor that you have to weigh with the demo about what happens to those. So next slide. Okay, we just quickly ran through some pros and cons, and again, I feel like you guys know this in your heart because you live here, but if you just demo and sell the land, and you have flexibility there because you could sell it, you can demo it whenever you can, and then you can decide to sit on the land and sell it later. That option doesn't go away. There's but the one problem is that holding on to an empty lot is hard and you don't know what the market is. John was just saying earlier that there's some vacant lots that aren't selling here in town. One scenario we ran was you could just basically demo the building and do, we think approximately 10 single family lots would sit on there or would fit. So you could plat it and sell those lots one by one, but it also could be a waiting game.
But I guess that depends on whether you have anybody willing to buy and develop it. So I don't know what the market is for that here.
So that's of course the easiest and least expensive approach, and you could ultimately generate some money from the sale, but that's not gonna cover. Well, you have state funding to potentially offset your demo costs, but you're not gonna make a lot of money selling off the land. And the con of that is that you lose your you're building with, it says historic there, it's not officially historic, not on the historic register, but has historic character. And you lose control of the site if you just sell it, it's not yours, obviously. Okay, next slide. Okay, as I mentioned, you can be more active in redevelopment. You guys could potentially plot the land, or you could enter into a public-private partnership with a developer. You could, if you did a request for proposals, you can put requirements on that for what you want it to be. And again, all of the scenarios of demolition, they eliminate your maintenance cost. This one, if you did enter in the most logical use, would be housing. And so the plus of that is that you could fill a housing need in your community. And again, the cons are the same of losing the building and its character. Next one. This one is a more complicated one, obviously, that you could do an adaptive reuse. So we heard various things, and we can pursue these in more detail, but what we heard and what we brainstormed before, we heard a community kitchen. You are using it as gym space, that could be expanded. You could have craft maker space. You've got a child care center in there, that could be expanded. This preserves your community history, it provides you with an amenity, you keep, you have something, you reuse what you have, basically. And there are more grant opportunities for this scenario. The cons is this is a lot to take on, years of involvement with partnerships and a developer. But we have some examples, next slide, of some other communities that have done that and have been successful. The Civic Center in Laramie that we just mentioned earlier, that was a school. It's now got theater space, it's got artist space, it's got
Office space
Office,
in there as well,
right.
so it's fully occupied is my understanding, and there's like 70 occupants in that building.
Yeah.
And so even though it's a former school, and it still looks like a former school, it's fully occupied. There's I think textiles, there's like music teachers, there's artists, I think there's like a radio station, there's some office space, so it's fully occupied. And it's not actually owned by the city anymore, it's owned by a nonprofit.
right, and they have staff.
And they have staff.
Yeah. There's an old school, two old schools, one in Florence and one in Trinidad. They have been turned into private schools, or commercial school, and they also have worker space in there, remote office space, and I try to get examples that had varying uses, and then even though Colorado Springs is obviously much bigger than you are, but they have a facility that has a brewery, has a bakery, it's a big draw. I don't know if you guys have the market for that, but I think it's important to note that that has been done, and they were able to access urban renewal funds and historic preservation tax credits on that one, I think. One that's not listed up here that I researched, and I just wanted to mention as another use. I didn't put this in the slide presentation because it's in Michigan, but then senior housing or affordable housing is another option. Next slide, please. So digging into the numbers. So we've been told that it costs you $60,000 a year to keep up the school as it is. We estimate the environmental cleanup costs to be about 1.1 million that you have to do before you demo it. The demo is the cheap part. We estimate that at just under 400,000. And the state has offered you funding of 1.3 million for demolition and abatement of the asbestos. So you could break even on that. But again, there are the issues of you've still got a lot. So next slide. And you have the other cost factor is you have the potential loss of what you're housing in there now. By our rough calculations, we think 18,000 square feet is being used for the gym and the school and the storage. And our estimate, if you went out and just found that space, we think that would cost $300,000 to replace that space. Then there's another loss. I mean, for me the school is a big impact. That's gonna increase their costs, it's gonna be potentially less central. So there's a lot to think about the school in particular. I think it's easier to find. The storage space is no big deal, gym might be a challenge too. And so it ultimately comes down to your choice of values about that. Next slide. So, this recaps some of the things that I mentioned before, so you have the opportunity to sell and create lots. And again, another thing I didn't mention about that's nice because it's creates consistency with the neighborhood if you can sell lots. And you can enter into a partnership and redevelop, and you can retain the building for its community use. But you'd have to think of a couple of different things. We mentioned that the Laramie Civic Center has staff. You'd have to consider how it was managed, what would be the goals and timeline for redevelopment, and seek grant opportunities, because obviously, this is gonna be a complicated funding scenario. Next. So I think I wanna pause it right there and just open up a discussion. Like, for us, it would help, we can certainly dig into the scenarios of what it could be like if the school were repurposed into housing, and we can look at grant opportunities. But if we wanna know more about your feelings, cause I don't wanna,
Make assumptions about what you wanna see done with the building.
right,
Yeah.
exactly.
And so we just briefly chatted about, since you do have funding for demolition, I mean, is it conceivable to demolish part of the building? And repurpose the other part? I mean, I don't know what the statutory limitations are on that. And what that would look like. I think we need to get a structural engineer in here to make sure that that's even possible, to figure out whether you can demo part of it and keep part of it that you want. So if that's something you want us to add to this discussion, we can do that. So. Any ideas, any thoughts? Doesn't have to be right now.
If you, go ahead, Doug. If you demoed it, which obviously I probably think that's the best solution, and you move on. And I went to school there, so, but if the state funds it, the demolition, are there any backside requirements?
To abate the asbestos.
No, I
which-
understand that, no, when you
Okay.
demolish it and it's all done,
Uh-huh.
can we sell it, or does the state have certain requirements that we now have to use it for something?
Oh, I don't know what the statutory requirements are
I
on
think it'd
that.
be very similar to the old school in Chugwater, where it was owned before the Facilities Commission built any land or gave school district money for land and buildings, so that profit would probably come back to the district.
And then we could also use it if we said, listen, if we wanted to build it, something new there, we could still use that land.
Meaning the town of Wheatland wanted to construct a
School.
School
school
district.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, and that's actually a scenario, I kind of glossed over that, but yet when I was saying you could sit on the land for a long time, but you can develop later when you have another school need. Do you think you have a school need that would be coming up? Cause that would be.
I think it's more about the gym space, the wrestling room, those are the areas.
That's what I was thinking. So Josh, how many square foot was the rec center that we proposed that was failed? Cause what I'm looking at here with this building is, what if we saved the structural parts of it, like the front where it says 1927?
Yeah.
And incorporate that into a new rec center on the lot right there, and be able to reuse that property for that. And parking's an issue, but there's a building over here that you guys use, Jimmy, for other stuff. Where can we move that stuff to gain the parking that we would need to be able to accommodate that? Cause if that wasn't on that lot, we'd have an extra 40 spots, roughly.
Yeah, our biggest trouble with that is just figuring out storage. And that's one of our
Gotcha.
big things right now is
But
we got some ideas over there for that spot, but
Okay,
right now, the little junior's hot, and that's one of those things, we just need a clean house, there's a lot of stuff that just needs to go by, but storage is one of our big issues that we really put stuff.
well, I know with the rec center, there was issues with where it was located because it was outside of town, it wasn't in town. This would fix that because it's right here. You don't want the kids to be bused from the other buildings to this location, walk across the street and be in the rec center. So, would it be feasible to put a 2-gym rec center in right there in place of that? Where the state cleans this up, we work it out with Parks and Rec or whoever to offset our costs on this, find out the grants. And repurpose that location into another usable space for our schools, because gym space is our biggest problem around here, it always is.
And that's
And I-
great feedback, that's exactly what we need,
Right,
we can
right.
run those numbers, we just want to
Because
do
that's
that
what I
from you,
would
so
like, that's what I would like
so-
to see, is what's the feasibility of taking that down, saving what we wanna save off the front of the building to say, the school was here, it was great, everyone loved it while it was here. How do we bring that part, and the main picture is here on option number 1, where's the front of the building that's got the 1927 on it.
Right.
How do we reincorporate that into a rec center and put a rec center on that
Okay,
location
just
where
to-
it's in town?
Just demolish the entire building, save that front facade.
Save that facade and
Okay.
put it on the new building to incorporate that and
That's
connect
what
the
I
history
think
with it, so we don't lose it.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I can go back and I know you had the failed rec center, would you have the same elements that were in that in the new one? Would you have this
I don't
plus the
know
school?
if they would fit, I don't know why not.
Yeah, okay, so I can go back
Because
and read
if we
it.
had an upper track, I know there was talked about an upper track, correct, Josh?
Yeah.
Above the gyms.
But what we ended up doing was just putting a 3-lane walking track around the main level. Because then we didn't have to pay for an elevator, we didn't have to pay for ADA access up to the top level. So if we put it down on the bottom, anyone had access to that.
And I look at that as because we've added our spring track season, that's typically a nightmare because of weather. Now we give the kids somewhere to practice indoors, that they don't lose out on that for meets. I mean, Gillette's got a huge indoor rec center that they do all of that in. You know, just to have some sort of track for them to run on here inside.
Well, we have indoor
Indoor
track
track,
and
That's
spring
what
track.
that's what I'm talking about is the indoor track, just to give them somewhere to be able to run inside.
so
You
I'm
know, instead
curious, oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
I'm wanting to try and incorporate what they wanted to do with the rec center
Sure.
onto this lot.
Yeah.
Because then we appease issues that were created with where it was gonna go. And we fix it, cause it's now right here.
So do you think that, or you know that that's why it failed, because
I
of
don't know that's
location
why
or-
it failed.
Okay.
I've got other reasons for that, we won't go there.
Okay.
But I think that would appease a lot of people because now we're giving the kids a safe space in the middle of town to go to. That doesn't require them to walk down 16th Street or across town because the buses already come here. If there's an after-school program, they can be bused right over to it and now we're done with it. They're here and they're safer per se than they would have been on the other end of town.
Well, that makes sense.
Just feedback that I heard from it, I would love to see something put on that lot. And if the state would pay to demolish the whole building, that's step one.
And so, what about the loss of the daycare? Could that be replaced somehow?
Well, could it be reincorporated in the one side of it? I mean, I don't know.
If that part of the building is stable, can we keep that and only tear down
The other part,
That's what we're asking.
But
about,
does
for
the
feedback.
demolition cover if it is partial?
Well, that, like I said, I don't know what the statute says, and I'm sure that
Thinking it
it's
does
probably
not.
guided, it is guided by statute and what they'll let you do, but unless it's, prohibited, that it says that the entire building must be demolished, maybe there's the option to save part of it,
I
demolish
think
the
we asked
rest
that
of it.
question and they were gonna complete that merger study, the most cost effective, remedy. And if it saved the state money, if we only can do part of the building, they might say, yeah, let's do it.
Our problem is they might let us do that, but to figure it out and make it complete, you'd have to have some architect and engineer almost design the building before we demolish it.
Versus clean slating it and
Yeah,
starting
that's
over.
my
Yeah.
concern, and then I don't know how all those systems are tied together, I'm sure they're not, are they tied together or are they separate?
They're pretty much separate.
Are they?
Like
So,
the daycare area.
Would that be something that you guys could look at?
yeah,
The MEP guys?
yeah, we could certainly look at how tied together, and that may already be in their study and I just
Okay.
didn't catch it, but the cost of the architecture, what it would be to do a new program, that's a whole big.
Oh, sure, yeah, that's it.
Right.
Yeah, our grant can't cover actual engineering or
Right.
actual architecture stuff.
Yeah.
We can get you to the point where you have some conceptual drawings and some ideas and that kind of thing, that you can go to an engineer or an architectural firm and get, the actual plans, but,
The other side of it is, it sounds harsh, maybe it's time that we separate from the daycare. We're gonna have plenty of time, they're gonna have plenty of time before it's all done, it's go look for another space. We really need this for what we think is the best for the kids.
Yeah, guess, and my biggest thing is, is it feasible to put the rec center on that location? Will it
Yeah.
fit?
Okay.
Well,
Cause I
yeah,
don't know,
Yeah,
I
that'd
don't know
look
what
great.
size of
You can-
lot it was
yeah.
on, or what that looked like out here.
Yeah, we can
But
basically
they
pick
would put
that up and
parking,
draw
I
it
think
on.
they have parking in the area that works a lot better.
Yeah, and the infrastructure too.
Right.
Yeah.
Cause that would be
Some
the
of the
big thing is the
infrastructure's
parking,
there,
where do you put everybody, cause if you have two gyms going for a basketball tournament, we'll fill up the streets in no time, and now we've got another nightmare.
So
So the
then-
PD would then have a major nightmare, so.
So this, oh, go ahead.
Sorry, so this idea would basically be pending if we can get the mill levy passed. Because the way it stands right now, I don't know that we can go to the state for any more money because of, we already have too much square footage, for.
Well, and I look at it, Sean, as maybe if this was an option for that rec center,
No,
will the
I-
mill levy pass?
I agree.
And that's just where I look at it
Yeah.
is,
I
can we
agree,
get
I
it to
just,
pass, cause
I
I
would
would love
like
to see
to
it
know
happen.
that, if we could have some sort of a survey or some way to find out if that in fact was the reason that most people voted no.
That's something that, so that's something that the the grant can help cover. I think to get like some conceptual
Mhm.
drawings and some outreach for the community.
To
You know,
find
some
out if-
numbers, like, if this cost X amount of dollars and you could get this, would you vote for it? Or is it just a hard no matter what? So,
I don't know.
yeah.
That's my question, and I love the idea of that because I think that it would definitely fit the needs of the community and when we need extra gym space, all of that, but yeah, I just don't know if the community has, a desire to see it. I felt like my group of people were all for the rec center and then I was really surprised when it didn't pass.
Yeah,
I think there were three things. There was location, there was obviously the tax, and then the swimming pool was, some people
Wanted that.
wanted that. So it took me a second to just find it. It was roughly 50,000 square feet. 260 by 175 was the,
I think your current building, if I remember right, is 38,000.
It's gonna be a little bit bigger, but that's okay, cause there's space on the lot.
Mhm.
The parking becomes the issue,
I think it
more than the
doesn't have to
building.
necessarily be identical either. So Mr. Sandlin is one of our principals, but he is also on the Parks and Recs board,
Oh,
so if you
perfect.
had any questions,
Okay, great, thank you.
he may be able to help you with that. But if you had any questions about what that proposal was or what it looked like, but I don't know that it has to be identical to that.
Right, things will change over time, so I think we use that.
Discuss again what the need was with the rec center and make it work on the lot. So,
Have you guys seen the ranch in Castro, civic center?
yeah,
There's a lot of use, I guess, but it's privately built. I'm sure it's a nice space with lots of flexibility.
How do you feel about housing and split, there are two versions of the housing. There would be, you could do adapt and reuse and put housing in it, or you can demo and sell the lot. Does that resonate with you at all? Should we continue to pursue the housing thing, or should we narrow it to the option of?
Did you say that it's structurally good?
We need to get a structural engineer up here to take a look at that.
So we do not know. If it were structurally good, I mean, there was the discussion about the CTE program possibly benefiting from developing apartments.
Mm-hmm.
It'd be a process,
Right.
class at a time, working with,
Okay,
I love that idea.
okay. We can
You wanna explore that?
explore that out then. I mean, if you guys think it's worth our time to explore the housing option, we can play that through with, you know, right thick in the
I still
garden.
feel like we'd have the abatement issue though.
Here's what I think we need to do, it's just we have to we're not getting anywhere, we're telling them we'd like this, and we're giving them too many options. At some point, we have to say, here's our direction. At least from my perspective.
Sure, and if it helps guide your direction, we're certainly happy to put together like some boards and do some outreach to the community if that is something that.
I think apartments don't work there. I mean, you know, apartments are something that, you know, they have apartments up in my neighborhood that just got built and some of them are empty.
Mhm.
You know, and
So the housing market's not strong here then.
Right.
here's what it's
We
strong.
lack housing, but
If you need low income housing, really low income, or, and this is no offense to people, but more that if you don't care what they're like when they get done renting them, and you just go in and they trash them out, and then you go fix them up, and then the next guy trashes them out and they go fix them up. That's always out there, and that's just the facts of how we live and the people that rent. Any kind of other rentals, I think, you can't have two-story rentals for low-income housing or for elderly, cause they're not gonna walk up and down the stairs.
I guess I was thinking that it could possibly work for teachers. A place for teachers being, you know, obviously they're not being paid greatly in our society, that it could be a benefit to our teachers, is what I was thinking.
And so I just wanna throw this out there, it's just something to think about, but, so we've done some of these reuse scenarios for hospitals. And to do like a redevelopment on an existing building, to use it as like a recruitment tool, and maybe it would work for teachers as well. You know, it's like a perk, if you come to our community and you stay for a year or whatever their contract is, or if it's traveling nurses or whatever, if you had a clinic or hospital. So it's a perk that, you know, that you can use to like lure people into the community for a while, until they're ready to buy a home. So that's just something that we presented at other sites.
So I do think some of the questions Doug had are good because we don't know the Mercer study, what exactly those funds can be used for. So we have to kind of wait till that finishes, and then if you have some of those options, and then as a school board, you can kind of make a decision.
Yeah.
That's the key thing, right, like how much of that money can we use it for?
Right.
Can we use it for partial demolishment, or is it all or nothing?
So when will you know that?
Well, it's kind of iffy in terms of timelines, we've been waiting for a little while for that Mercer, and I don't know, Jim, do you have an update on that, or?
I actually met with Karen today from the state, and she said that realistically, that should start within the next 2 months on that building.
Okay.
So. Cause I've been told that a few times, so.
Should we just kind of like slow walk this until you know more? I mean, do
Well,
that.
I think the options, and I know the community has talked about this forever. I mean, I remember, you know, we've had these discussions, but I think now we're like all on the same page, we're waiting for the state and everything, so I think the options, the rec center, potential housing, I think those are good for us to have when we know what we can do.
Right.
Okay.
Pretty.
Just so that we'll be ready to, whether it's demolished or.
Or whatever you choose to do, or whatever they'll fund, or
Right.
whatever
feel
that
like-
study looks like.
Even though we've talked about it forever, we're at a starting point now where we're actually gonna get something done.
Right.
We have to see the end in sight, something has to be done with it.
One way or the other, eventually.
And, you know, we wanna do what works for you, and that makes sense to me too, those are the two more complicated scenarios. I think what we wouldn't pursue anymore is the idea of selling the land and parceling it off, cause that is what it is. I mean, there's not much more to say about that, that math is pretty easy, and I probably wouldn't pursue the makerspace, office space scenario, cause I think housing is probably a stronger candidate. Or, you know, those other, you know, really elaborate adaptive reuses might, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm just saying, that seems like that's not where your interests are going in rec center and housing as primary.
I would agree with that.
Okay, so those two, so the demolition is just like Lynn said, it just is what it is. You know, you demo it, and you have a vacant lot, maybe somebody buys it, maybe they don't. So that's pretty straightforward, I think, right?
yeah.
So that'll just be included as just like a statement of fact, I
Right,
think.
then the next one would be, would the rec center work on there, how would that work? And then the
Yeah.
third would be adaptive reuse, but with a focus on housing, focus on teachers and.
Okay. And maybe eventually we'll know whether you can demolish part of the building and save it and then build onto it or whatever, so.
What is the goal with the housing then? Are you wanting like apartments, are you wanting townhouses, or are you wanting efficiency apartments? Because I think due to the location of where it is, that could be in question.
I think the only thing that would feasibly work on that would be townhouses for space. But even then, selling lots off individually, correct me if I'm wrong, but there's lots for sale in town that never move because the price is too high. So we're talking peanuts to get rid of the lots for someone to build on it. It's just, I don't know that that's practical because we'll sit on them like everybody else does around here for too long. And now we have a vacant lot that but I see what you're saying. But I would say a developer like the one doing 28th Street would be the way to go, to come in and say, okay, we're gonna build 8 houses on this, here they are, and then go from there. If that was,
Sell the whole thing to a developer.
I would think that would be more practical than trying to sell them individually and wait for someone to build on it. Cause then at least we know what we're getting.
The other housing scenario is, that I thought you guys were talking about, was developing the existing building into
Yes.
apartments.
Exactly.
Okay.
Right, that's kind of where
And
I'm
it
at.
would be more of an efficiency, you know, maybe a student teacher is coming in or whatever,
Here's what we
smaller.
also we have 2 facilities here, we own a lot of the property in the area. Do we wanna get rid of that property or keep it as the school district property? I'm telling you, my mind will probably never change on this, because it hasn't changed since they said it wasn't good enough for a school. I would have torn it down that same year and been done with it, we wouldn't have this conversation. I'm more like Clay, let's tear it down, depending on how we can do that. Figure out how we put a rec center in. It may not be quick, it may be that we have to be patient with some of this stuff. But then we're done with it, we quit talking about it. No, I'm serious, I mean, it was a rat hole when I went to grade school there, and frankly, it hadn't got much better. And so I think if I was to vote, that's what I'm gonna vote, is just, let's move forward. We know that it's gonna take us some time to probably get the rec center and the gym. That gives our maintenance guy some time to figure out what he has to do. It gives us some time to probably sell, because on this tax, we still have, the people still have to pay that off. It's, the last one passed and I think it just kicks in right now. I think we paid off the last one. So there's a few years left even before we could even vote on that next go around. But that's me personally, but I think it's,
Okay, I think we are moving forward because we just had this done in March and it's June and we're having the discussion on what to do with it. So I take that as moving forward.
And if you have the numbers, at least rough numbers, maybe
Just
it'll,
kind of roughly.
yeah, it'll maybe.
Okay, so just to, we've got
Yes.
time issues, so any other questions, from the audience about the old junior high, any?
And John has our contact information, so if you come up with questions, please feel free, and then we'll try to incorporate it into the report.
Right.
You'll see the next report in draftish, finalish form to comment on, and then let us know what you think.
Okay,
And if it's just like, no, scratch this one, we'd like to know that too.
perfect, I appreciate your work.
Yeah, it gave us the direction we needed.
Yeah,
So,
Thank you so
Yeah.
much, thank you.
Yeah,
Thank
we
you.
appreciate,
Thank
we
Thank you,
appreciate
guys.
it, thank you,
Safe travels.
yes,
Thank
definitely.
Alright, moving on to topic number 2.
Pardon me.
Our firearms rule. I'd like to start that. I did reach out to both of our senator and our representative, and they both sent me a statement. So I'll read them and then we'll open it up. First, anybody else in the audience need a copy of our proposed rule? We have some up here. Thank you. Okay, so Darren Smith's statement is, please tell them that I am grateful Plat One is doing their best to comply with the new level of protection. This law now provides Wyoming's most precious commodity, our children. Jeremy Haroldson, our representative, says, I'd like to honor you guys tonight as you discuss and make decisions regarding the policies surrounding the elimination of gun-free zones. I know the battle always is finding the balance between preserving rights, bringing fair policy, and the concern of safety. So my challenge for you as you look at this is to ask the question, how can we do both? Can you offer training for teachers but do it in a way that doesn't make them lose their rights? A way to do this is to possibly tap into the state funds earmarked for training, yet not making it a requirement. This is just a suggestion. This in turn places the liability on the permit holder and at the same time offers training while preserving freedoms. In the end, I know you guys will come to the right decision, and I can only offer another option in the long list of potential plans. I appreciate all you guys do and honor you as you make those decisions moving forward. Respectfully, Jeremy Haroldson. So there you go. If anybody wants a copy of it, I can send it to you. So we have been talking about the gun-free zones repealed, takes effect July 1. Chase and Clay and I looked over the model policy. Basically, the school districts now have the option of the statute says we may make rules on our employees and volunteers. We don't have to. We have two options. We can let it go through as is and not do anything, which means that if they meet the criteria of the law, they have a concealed carry permit, they can carry. If we make a rule, then we get to decide to some degree on what that looks like for Plat 1. We can't put a law into it, but we can at least put in hours of training and things like that. So, Clay, since you were on the committee too, you know.
Yeah, so we talked about this a lot because it's quite the deal. I'm not trying to impede anybody's rights here, I just personally have a major problem with guns in our district, but that's just me. I have no problem with your right to carry your arms, I have no problem for you to own your arms. I own plenty of guns, I just don't feel comfortable with that myself personally. So we talked about this, we discussed, the conceal and carry permit, what it takes to get it in our state. I personally think it lacks a little bit, if we're gonna ask a teacher to carry a gun or they want to carry a gun, just having a permit doesn't give you the training on scenarios, it doesn't give you the training on the law, it doesn't give you the training on how to handle a situation. God forbid we have one. And we have both of our law enforcement departments represented tonight, which thank you guys for coming. I wanna thank you guys personally because I know that when you are called upon, you show up. And that's, I think, a big problem in a lot of places is that there's too much time in between. But that's a different topic for a different time. I don't know, this is tough. This is really tough because it's not something that I thought I'd ever see, but here it is. So, I guess, what's everyone that has come here, what's your input on this? Because we're looking at this to say, okay, if you're gonna do it, you gotta have some training. Now, how much training, that's where the caveats come in with this because the model policy that we were given gives out a certain amount. And if we look at courses and trainings for that, it's what's asked for in the model policy, and what we've got here is a little more than just a, one course deal. So how do we balance it? Because we're not gonna impede someone's right to carry, because you have that right. But it becomes tricky because if you're gonna do it in a classroom, you're gonna do it day in and day out. How can it be done safely? How can it be done in a manner that kids don't know it's there? Which is one part of this with a biometric box, is I brought up the point that I have this lovely bag right here. Now, if I was gonna conceal and carry, I would not have it on my person. Because I know one too many kids in 5 seconds would find my printing wherever the hell it was at, excuse my French, and would know immediately that I have a gun on me. I would rather have it somewhere like this in a locked container where I have this on me at all times. Everywhere I go, it becomes second nature. Kids just think I'm packing around my computer. But with the biometric box, it needs to be secured, it needs to be in a locked location. That raises challenges. So I don't know how you get around that. I don't know how we work this out. This is just step one, because I feel that if we're gonna entrust someone to, in essence, carry a weapon for the idea of protection in a worst case scenario, then some training has to be had. And I don't know what that amount quantifies to, I don't know what recurring should be. I've looked at different training programs, we talked about this in our meeting, there are training programs that offer 8-hour courses, 12-hour courses. But then your reoccurring obviously is half of that, because now we're just going to the range and probably shooting X number of rounds to say that we can't hit what we're shooting at. And going over any updates potentially that there are with a carry law or a state law. But I don't know where you draw that line in the sand with what's enough and what's too much. We talked about training personnel having 10 years of experience. I have no problem with that. If we find any good qualified place to give you training, at least 2 people on staff have either been in the military or law enforcement for that period of time, and that's not a big deal. But the problem with this becomes, how do we ensure that those individuals that have decided they wanna do this understand the ramifications of what they're doing more than just, I know it's my duty to protect my kids. I mean, it's my duty to protect my children, it's my duty to protect other kids when we're doing any volunteering whatsoever, that's what we're here for. But how do we do this the right way where, one, we're not opening Pandora's box for some kind of liability, which I don't think it matters any way, shape or form how we do this. We're opening the box has been opened. Can't be shut, can't be taken away, it's here. When we have a function like a basketball game, Lord knows, because if you've got it. My big question is, how do we ensure that if you, Dave Russell, have a conceal and carry permit, that you are lawfully carrying? That's an invasion of rights, if I ask you to come in to tell me you have it. Now, we are looking to instill Raptor, correct, Ryan, which will, you'll put your information in from the get-go. I have questions with that, that's a whole nother thing. But I think the main part of this is, what do we need to do so that we do ensure the safety of our kids? Because we don't need an accidental discharge in the bathroom, we don't need to go down that route. We don't need somebody's kid finding your lockbox and now everybody in the school knows about it, now what? Now we've crossed another threshold of fun that we've gotta sort out. So the model policy did a great job kind of saying, okay, here it is, here's what we're gonna try and lay out. The problem for us now is, how do we lay it out? And we've talked about it and it's tough, because what hours of training should someone have to be qualified to do that? In my mind, there's never enough. Doesn't matter how many times I've been CPR first aid trained, when something happens bad, anybody is still gonna hesitate before they start doing what they need to do. And I don't know, it bothers me that our world has come to this. because schools were always a safe place. I think they still are. But now we've opened the door for things. And I'll just put it at that, we've opened the door for things. I'm not saying good, I'm not saying bad, I don't know what it is. But I don't know how we do this. I know there are some districts that have chosen, John, thank you for saying that thing about Powell, have chosen not to put in rules and just say, okay, state says you can do it, here you go. I don't know.
Could I say something? I guess what keeps coming to my mind is that I think it is really important to have scenario-based training, but I think it should be for everyone. Everyone, because everyone could be involved in an incident situation, whether they're deciding to carry or not.
And unfortunately, I think everyone gets active shooting training now. We do it at the REA, we do it, everyone does it because we have to.
And we have a schedule this in February.
Yeah, so it does happen, it's just,
Okay.
with this, it's more of a scenario of Jimmy pulled a gun out of his bag, now what are you doing about it? Because you worked for years with Jimmy and got to know him really well, and now we have a whole different situation that you as a teacher, they're not trained for that, has to cross that bridge at that moment. And that's where I
You're saying
have concerns.
a student has it, or
No,
another
if in
one?
the scenario, that's the scenario side of this training, cause Dave and Officer Mintz, how do you guys train for that? I mean, you guys train for that extensively, not only in the academy, but you train for it here, regularly.
Yeah, so we do it, I mean, at the academy, it's all basically like a video game set up for it. Back at the departments, we'll just set up scenarios like, and they can run through it dry, and then at other times, we'll set up scenarios where we're using dummy rounds so they can shoot back at each other and kinda
So essentially it's simulation, like it shoots a little paintball.
just.
It just adds that new element of that scenario, cause it hurts when you get hit.
You bring the realism into it.
Yep. So it adds a whole different story when somebody else is shooting back at you, right? That threat, your adrenaline spikes. So that adds a little bit more realism to that training.
I guess that's the side of this with the training factor is, if you do something repetitively enough, it's not second nature, but at least you're not caught going, oh my God, what do we do? And that's something I think that we need to work out with our law enforcement of, what does that look like for you guys in this scenario? Because obviously now that's a whole new ballgame with, not that it probably didn't happen already, cause let's be realistic, it probably did more than once. But it's how do we try and make things okay with our situation in the district?
Well, and I think something you guys are gonna have to think about too, I guess statute allows, but there's gonna have to be some thought on. I think you guys still need to have rules in place for who's gonna carry or not. Let's say Clay comes in one day, school district has no rules and he's pissed off at some kids and just pulls his gun out and start popping rounds. I mean, we've had a teacher go off like that within the past few years, saying that she was gonna do that, and heaven forbid if she was allowed to carry in the school. So I don't know, if you guys set up some sort of evaluation for them, or how you go about that, trying to
We're
ensure.
not allowed,
I know.
by state statute, we can't. Prior law did allow
For
for
that,
schools to have psych evals on anybody that wanted to carry, that has gone away. So the only, our rule, if we choose to make a rule, we can designate how much training they have, that's pretty much what we're limited to.
Just shooting, going out and shooting on live rounds every year or something, they need more than that on a continuing basis, don't they?
Yeah,
What would that include?
I mean, you're probably looking at upwards of 50 hours a year just to go over basics of how to handle the weapon each time, securing your weapon, those sorts of just the basic level things. Then you would progress into the live shooting in various scenarios. as well as some first aid procedures within that. And then going on those force trainings, and we're gonna have to come up with a system, so when we work with them, for them to identify to us that they're a teacher, not some parent in here. Cause that's the other issue. I'm not gonna know every teacher in here, and if I come through the door for somebody with a gun and they're the first person we see, it's likely not gonna go well.
So I do know they make some equipment, it's either a band
That's
or a
what we
vest
thought.
that gets thrown on if they're allowed, if they are carrying in the schools, that identifier for us. Cause if that were to happen, I'm coming through the door, I'm looking for the first person with a gun. If there's rounds getting fired and I'm coming through the door for an active shooter, that's where I'm looking, right? So I don't wanna shoot the innocent teacher, but I don't know no different, because they're the one with the gun. And if they're engaging a suspect down the hall, all I see is that person firing a gun, right? So either a vest, an orange hat, some kind of band that goes on their arm.
So how does that not give them away? I'm asking the question, I'm
That's
not
when it-
arguing with it.
So that would be something that's hidden
When they're
unless they have to
And I
engage.
think that would be a yearly rotation, if we go 2 years with a pink band, after year number 2, we change to a purple one,
Yeah.
or whatever that may be to keep it changed up, but that, it'd have to be something that only that individual knows about, and that designated individual that's looking at these rules and saying, okay, they've got the certificates now. Now we give them that band.
So I guess my question is, if you come into the school and you're doing that, I mean, by all means, do whatever. But my question is, let's say the teacher is there and they've got the pink band, but I'm the parent that came in the room for reading and this teacher does go ballistic and this person's in the right, they don't have the pink band, like, because it doesn't matter, they can all,
Yeah, no,
It's a
it's a
free-for-all
terrible
now.
situation, I mean,
so that's
I mean,
just my
that's-
only
and I-
drawback that,
Right, no, and I see what you're saying, if that event happens, it's horrible. But I think there has to be something for us, at least at
And I'm
that
not
point, like, we
arguing
gotta
this.
use the totality of everything that's going on to make a decision whether that person wearing the band is the bad guy or not.
You can't use words. I mean,
yeah,
can
cause
the
they're
teacher
gonna,
say,
they're pulling a gun on somebody, they're gonna be honest,
Well, yeah,
I'm just saying.
I mean, and in that, at least in the trainings, the active shooter trainings that I've been in, where there's gunfire and kids screaming, I mean, I'm not gonna hear somebody yelling a safe word to me.
Yeah.
I'm just not gonna hear that.
true,
And the biggest thing is gonna be, we need to train with school staff and law enforcement in these scenarios. There's scenario-based trainings we need to be involved.
Yeah.
So when I come through the door and I'm yelling, drop the gun, you better drop the gun. I mean, at that point, that's,
it seems
What's gonna have
logical
to happen?
that you guys would be the trainers. So that y'all can be on the same page. Just thoughts. The other thing, I mean, the whole idea of this is the fact that it does take law enforcement time to get to a situation, and a lot of bad can happen before then. I mean, that's what we're trying to prevent. And, we're trying to protect our kids. It seems logical, the presence of a gun is a stabilizing factor from someone who wants to go ballistic and come into a situation, they're gonna find out they don't have a bunch of sitting ducks. This is the reason why you would want to even consider this.
no, I agree, the thought of having somebody that's going to end that threat right here in the schools is a great idea. I mean, you look at multiple, active shooters throughout the country that are stopped before cops even get there. And that's your concealed carry people, right?
Yeah.
And then most active shooters, when they're engaged the other way, they're out of the fight.
And that's the reason. I know that it brings up a lot, but that's the hope, that it will prevent that.
If somebody wants to carry a concealed weapon, and it's in a school, and they wanna be the teacher or the they should also want to take those extra steps to be appropriately trained.
Sure.
I mean, if they think it's so important to have a concealed carry, let's make sure that here are the requirements, and if you think it's important, you will do this. I would say that they probably have to do a yearly thing, and that isn't like going out and fire some live rounds, get trained in it, refresh that training, new techniques come up in a year for law enforcement to help them with. So I'm more of, the initial training, 16 hours may be enough, but I think every year, if they think this is so important, which I think this is a bad idea anyway from the standpoint of the state law, but that's passed and we have to deal with it. And I think then we have to make sure that they have all the training so that they can, if they are put in that position, have the best shot of protecting the children, if that's what you think this is gonna do. And I think
That's why Doug, I went through and looked at multiple of these courses and see,
Efficiency standard for.
what does it take to just get your concealed carry training done? What do those hours look like? And the 16 plus the 8 is a lot.
it's not enough for me,
Well, no, and I don't disagree with that, but at the same time, as much as I wanna be Laramie or Albany County and say 60 hours, I don't wanna be that guy that wants to impede your right to carry.
we're not impeding it, we're saying if you think it's so important to protect our children, we want you to be the best at it.
Well, that's the 12 hours of recurring, I mean, that's,
That's,
I know it's not, I know that, but I don't
And
know.
those numbers are just,
Yeah,
we left them in there for discussion purposes, so.
Alright.
So if I might, I just have a quick question, you had said something about, like a video training, what do you think the possibility, cause what I look at is there's time constraints on everybody's life, they have family, there's probably gonna be costs that might really, for anybody's desire maybe, cause if we're gonna ask up to 60 hours, most people are gonna look at that and go, well, that might be a little bit more than I can commit to right now. So when you were talking about the video training, what is that?
so that's just simulated training, and the academy's the only one that does that for us.
Oh, they're the only ones, okay.
Well, I'm a bus driver and I cannot imagine ever packing a weapon, I agree with you 100%. And I have a weapon at home every day because I have rattlesnakes. That's a real different scenario. Unless you're prepared to use it, you shouldn't carry one. And my question would be, if it's supposed to be a deterrent, then why would it be concealed? Because seeing someone with a gun on their hip is much more of a deterrent than wondering if they have one. And I don't know what the details are of any
So
sort.
the law does read that if you do conceal it, and it has to be concealed, it cannot be open carry, constitutional carry is not allowed. So
In
that's
the
why
school?
in
In the
any
school, can't
public,
get for
with that repeal, you can't, in a government building, in a school, you can't open carry. That's the big thing with that, was you can't do that, and Jeremy did put a video out that I watched that he just did, that actually he went through that, and I'll give him props, I'll admit, there's a lot of things Jeremy says I'm not a big fan of, but I watched that and I didn't think it was that bad because he laid it out. Here's what it says, here's what it is, and here's that right within the bill. Now, I agree with you, seeing it as a deterrent, but at the same time, there are kids in this district probably, and I can't speak for this personally, but I've known kids in the past, other places, that weapons were used to intimidate them, they were used to abuse them. And I don't need a trigger object for a kid that's his safe place,
Right.
Your bus is a safe place, there are kids that get on your bus in the morning probably that now whatever worry they had at 7 o'clock in the morning is gone because they know they're safe and they're going where they need to go.
Yep.
So that's the other thing with this is I don't know, I still see it as a safe place, but at the same time, Joe Blow down the street can walk in a building as of July first or the June first. July first, can walk right on in that gym over there with a concealed weapon and no one can say anything about it. So it becomes a matter of with this is how do we try and control, have some, not control, control is not the word I'm looking for, that'll be misquoted. Have some say in what you know as that individual with that gun or with that weapon. Do you have some training? Do you have some knowledge of what pulling that thing from a concealed position immediately does? You know, cause if I walked out in the street right now and I pulled a concealed weapon, the three of us are gonna have a fun conversation. Whether I can do it or not, because the manner in which I did it changes things, it's a whole nightmare. So I think the idea with this set of rules is that we are trying to say, okay, let's get you some training. If you wanna carry that gun on that bus, let's get you some training, because maybe, you know, and maybe there's a scenario in a
I
course
have a
that.
tired number.
Right, but I'm just saying, that if you go to one of those courses and you say, hey, I drive a school bus, they may say, okay, let's go through this part of a training. Because you need to know that, you need to know what should you do, because it's more defense, correct me if I'm wrong, guys, than anything else. You know, I try and watch a lot of YouTube videos and that's its own nightmare of lack of information, it's like Google searching something. But most of those instructors will be, what is your flight? What are you doing first to get away from the situation? We don't have that luxury now, because here it is. So how do we ask you to get training that will be helpful, or at least resemble some comfort of some sort that you understand your liability with this?
Well, Blaine already told the bus drivers that we have to have extra training, is that not, I mean, it's not an issue to me, but, and obviously how you conceal it on a bus would be a little different.
It would be, you know,
Yeah.
so, and I don't know on that. This policy, or this set of rules would be district-wide. Doesn't matter if you're a bus driver, if you're a volunteer, a coach, teacher, an admin staff in this building, you would fall under that. And a volunteer, according to the language, if I choose to go with my kids to the territorial prison in Laramie, if I don't have this amount of training and I've showed someone here that is qualified with that, I can't conceal and carry. Because now I'm taking on a different role, which we recognize in this as a volunteer is, you know, same as a district hired employee that's paid. You know, you're under the same stipulations.
I'm gonna interrupt for a minute, Amanda's gonna leave.
I gotta go to work.
So I just wanna get her 2 cents in on it and then we'll go to the audience.
I don't usually get asked my 2 cents around here. I'm usually willing to give it. So, I agree with Doug. I don't agree with what happened with, that this became law or bill or whatever you wanna call it. I don't agree with it. I do agree that something needs to be in place so that there is something, but then, you know, the joys of being in this position and being one of 7, I agree that when you take on a role, whether it be carrying a gun or joining a board or anything, you know, you have expectations of people and what you hope and think that they should do. But I'll tell you, on this one, I don't agree with it. I'm a parent, I'm a school board member, I'm bazillion other things. I'm not a fan of it, but we do have to figure it out and how we're gonna make it work now.
So,
But one thing I will tell you up front that I do not like about this position right here is after I've made a decision and I've made a vote, somebody calls me the next day and tells me what I should have done when they never called me before that. And on this topic, I have received 1 email that went to the entire board, and I've had 1 teacher call me and ask me about it. Not one other person has said a word to me about it. I've shared on social media the information that the school district has put out. Not one person has approached me, and I try to be open and I try to go and ask the questions and do the things and come in here informed, but I try to not always ask the same people. And obviously I have friends, they're my friends, so on a lot of things we're like-minded. I don't wanna ask them on something like this, and I don't want them every time I go and talk to them to be like, well, what's the school problem today? I don't want that, ever. But I think that in the past 2.5 years, however long I've been doing this, I've been pretty open, I ask a lot of questions and do the things, but I'm getting to the point where nobody's coming and talking to me. I can't come in here and do the right thing and make the vote, cause it's not supposed to be all on me. I'm supposed to be representing other people, but if I don't know what the other people think, I don't feel like I can do that. So, I don't like it, but I don't know what everybody else is thinking, I don't know, like, I'm not hard to find, I'm pretty much everywhere it feels like all the time, my phone number is hopefully everywhere but on the bathroom wall, like, I don't know, I guess I'm welcoming the information, you know, everybody in the public gets all wound up about the old junior high, and they're willing to tell you their opinion until you want their opinion, and then it's radio silence. So, that's my
Thank you
bandwagon.
all of the visitors that are here, thank you
Yes,
for
thank
being
you.
here, cause we don't know until we hear from you guys.
That's my bandwagon, would work.
Alright, okay.
Thank you.
Have fun.
Thanks for coming.
And I know, Debbie, how are you on time? You're
I have a little more time.
Okay, alright, so let's open it up to the audience, anybody else join in, you had a
Yeah,
thought
I just,
that I thought was pretty interesting.
you know, I've been concerned about this for a year, ever since I just couldn't believe that this was the discussion, so I've tried to like learn a little along the way, and it is a law, and so there's that. And, I like, what helps my mind is somebody told me about movie theaters or whatever, when they put no guns allowed, then the shooters or whatever feel more comfortable walking into a place such as that. I've taught for quite a few years, and in those years I've been around some big conflicts with kids. And I think the thing that comes to my mind is, if the point of it is for whoever's coming with the gun to know that all of us, there may be some of us that have a gun, then when you talk about this box in the room, maybe consider every classroom has a box. Cause then it's not oh, so-and-so has a box, you know,
You're not singled out at that point.
yeah.
That's good.
So if everybody has a box, then nobody knows, and then maybe you're a little safer. I don't know, that's just how I've kind of come to peace with it, if everybody has a box.
That's good.
So that's a level of comfort for you, is knowing that, you know.
Well, cause I think the
Kids
point is that, like,
No,
we're
I get
supposed
it.
to feel safer.
Mhm.
Because
I
who
like
knows who has a gun,
I like
and I
that.
have family members that carry guns, and I do feel safer, you know, so I think that,
And
I get the point of it, but it does stress me out.
Do you have anything to share?
I had a email the board, some of the concerns that I had, I agree with Clay. On his idea about it, I'm not, my little girl's starting kindergarten, and, you know, quite frankly, it makes me nervous. She's incredibly smart and she watches everything that you do. And she will notice if, you know, anybody has a box, or you don't have a box, or, you know, and I'm worried about the anxiety that it can cause to children. You know, if they do catch on, and the mental health aspect on that. So I wanted to come here today because I didn't want to judge completely. I wanted to be able to listen and kind of know about what you guys were thinking, and the rules that you wanted to, you know, place, so. I want him to be an informed parent.
Thank you.
Appreciate
I'm
you
shocked there aren't
coming.
more people here, frankly, but
This is step one in this step, because in order to do this, we need to do
We have to
multiple
have some
meetings, we have to have
public
multiple
hearing.
things, hearings, post it, get it out there so we can get more input. So this was phase one, was here's our starting block. So we're not close to having something in place yet.
Yeah.
But sooner rather than later.
Well, and our first, probably on Monday, depending on everybody's feeling, we will, the first thing we have to do is vote on whether we, that as a district, are going to have a rule in place.
Right.
Cause that's still, we can go either way.
Here's my thing, I'm for a rule in place, I think it's upon us to do whatever we need to do. I think it gives the comfort to law enforcement to know that we've done certain things. I will also tell you that I'm at a minimum of 20 hours at the initial for the live fire, probably 10 hours of the scenario based, that's initial. And I'm for probably 16 hours a year of training. If we don't do that, I think we've failed. And I think we need that, and the people that are interested in this will do that and probably appreciate doing it. And so that's the minimum I'm willing to do right now, is that we have the rule, that we have 20 hours. So really, to get it, you're gonna have 30 hours right out of the chute. And then you have to have 16 hours a year. And I think they can find that training. I think the other thing, probably if law enforcement's involved, knowing who has concealed carry is probably gonna be easier for them, because they're gonna probably be involved in the training. I think, and I don't know, David probably knows everybody that has a concealed carry. Anybody that wants a concealed carry, I get a fax too, but that's really something that we don't share with anybody. They just ask for criminal histories from my office and David's and Wheeling PD if they have information on it. So we all get that. But for me, I think we have an obligation to set some standards. I think we have an obligation to have at least that, to get that 30 hours plus continuing 16 hours a year.
And don't get me wrong, I'm not knocking what DCI does to sort out whether you can have it or not.
There
Because
is
they put
really,
time into that, but it's limited.
so even on my end, cause I have to approve them, we are basically, unless it's something really egregious, basically we're told not to deny. And then if we do, DCI still, on lots of occasions, will just approve it just cause of the way statute's written in this state. So,
And a lot of them, I don't even know the people because they're from, the FBI sends them to us initially.
yeah.
So,
I'm not opposed to a policy. I agree that guidance is needed. I don't know about hours, cause I don't know what the training is like and how efficient it is. I think it's hard to put, I think we need to know more specifically about training and what is recommended by professionals and different things. But I think it is wisdom, and I hope the mindset will become, you're safer, like you had mentioned, you're safer with the presence of a gun. You're safer, and hopefully our children will have that same mindset as we go forward. It becomes a norm, and I think we have to be careful as parents, you know, to not put fear about it, because the presence of a gun can be a very safe thing. It should be, it's the intention.
well, Jeremy talked about the statistics. Is that what you were talking about, Clay? I mean,
That going through what the law says.
there were less likely to be, regarding schools I'm talking about.
Finish your thought. There's less likely.
Me?
Yeah.
No, I understand the statistics, but I still think it's a bad idea. And I won't be carrying one on my bus, so, I don't know.
And everyone needs to make that choice.
Yeah,
I don't
yeah.
think that there is gonna be a lot of people interested in carrying, I really don't. But, like you said, if there's a box, if there's a sign, we hope it's a deterrent.
So I guess
We're not gonna advertise this.
is the point that whoever chooses to do this, you guys won't know who they are?
They will have a
Someone in the
designated
district.
individual within the district, now, be that John, be that the building principal, those individuals will know.
Oh, okay.
Somebody they have to
But-
turn their certificates in at
Yeah.
completion of training to someone, and that's yet to be determined.
But in general, I can't ask you if you come in the building whether you have if you're lawfully carrying with your concealed carry permit. I can't do that, that's an invasion of your privacy. So,
Just to clarify, sorry, I'm just making notes. Doug, you said you wanted 20 hours of the live round and a minimum of 10 hours for scenario and 16 hours
every year.
every year.
Anybody else in the audience have anything to add?
And I don't think that's enough, but I'm willing to start at that point.
Well, we have to have a starting point. So the next question is maybe it's a business opportunity for people, I'm not sure. Well, where would we begin to look for this type of training?
Right.
it's not something we would provide, cause
Well,
as soon as we say that we're gonna pay for it, we open another liability door that we don't need. So, and the same with like paying for training, in my mind, no, that's a
No, I'm just saying, where would people, where do you even begin to go?
So.
They know where to go.
Yeah.
They'll-
Yeah. While we were in one of our last meetings, not last meeting, cause I didn't make it to that one, but the one before, I Google searched it. And in 10 seconds, there was 5 places within the state of Wyoming that you could go and get numerous hours of training in different scenario setups. All of them offered something that handled your conceal and carry and what your rights were, whether you conceal it, whether you draw it, all of the above. There was at least 5 within Fort Collins and Denver that offered extensive trainings on what the Colorado law states, which by the way is a lot more than what ours does. And then there was a lot of different trainings and scenario training with them. And that, there was a readily available amount that were consistently had, if they're doing training.
So it's not like, I just,
You could go to
it's kind
Cheyenne or
of, it's
Casper.
kind of like finding, a brain surgeon for pediatrics in Wyoming. You don't find that here, so that's what I was just
Well,
gonna,
you know,
curious if there was, any,
and your options change too based on price and what you got for experience, what your training equated to. One of them, I think the one in Casper was one for women. And it was a lot of self-defense. It was, how do you conceal and carry with whatever you're doing? What are your rights? All of that. It was a multi-day course that they had laid out. So very impressive what's out there.
okay,
And then the price varies a lot, so.
clearly I've never looked it up.
Some of them were as $150 for your 8-hour training. Some of them were $300 for a 2-day course, whatever that may be. I mean, there's options.
So
There's
not
a lot
real
of-
cost prohibitive then,
Not really.
okay.
The biggest thing on our end is, okay, if we go 30 hours, okay, are you taking a course in Casper and one in Cheyenne and one in Fort Collins, so you get the best of all 3 worlds? I mean, cause what they teach you in Fort Collins may be a whole different ballgame because of the shootings they've had around Denver. I don't know.
Over in Goshen County, it looks like Chief Matt Johnson is gonna be providing the training.
Oh.
And so,
But Sean, to answer your question, there's a lot of options out there
Okay.
within a reasonable amount of time to get to. So that was something that was available. I did look at that. So. I agree with Doug, I don't like this in any way, shape or form, but here we are. So.
Okay, any further comment, Ryan?
So, I completely agree with training, but if we're not gonna provide it, or the school's not gonna provide it, how do you set a standard at what kind of training you're gonna get? And that would be my first concern, is obviously, Clay, you kinda hit on that a little bit, where what you get in Casper is gonna be different from Fort Collins. But if we're gonna mandate this training, how do we mandate something without a standard?
Good point, and
So-
maybe that comes down to language of your training should include these things to kind of guide it, but yeah, this is,
I
correct me if I'm
honestly,
wrong, Doug, but this is a lawyer thing here, like how much do you open yourself up to, like should, shall, when, why?
Honestly, we have a law, we have to try to solve it. It's new territory for all of us. I mean,
And
and the only one that has standards are the police officers. I mean, they go to the academy, here are the standards. They have somebody that's certified for them to go out and qualify is it every month you guys go out and qualify?
So all our rules require is twice a year, and we usually go out every couple months and we're
But
shooting.
they have trainers that are qualified to train in their departments. And so we're gonna learn these standards and probably talk to other people. And I think we're in no man's land, we're in, you know,
so I think it
it's
is,
a scenario that
answer your-
shouldn't be here, but the legislators thought they were smarter than the rest of us, and we are here, now we have to deal with it.
I think to answer your question, Ryan, if you go out and you take a course, you know, if it's 16 hours that you need a live fire, does that, is that close quarters combat with your AR? Is that pistol training? I don't know that we wanna narrow it down to this is what you have to do. Because then what are we bringing upon us, because we said, okay, you've gotta have this specific stuff. My thing is, did you go out and did you train with your pistol? Did someone take you and they load you load your rounds up, you get ready to go, and now you have to practice for the next 6 hours pulling from a concealed position and shooting? Because I can tell you right now, if I had to do that, I'd be afraid I'd shoot a hole in my leg. Cause I don't do it.
Here's the
I don't do it.
here's the problem you're gonna have with that, is if we don't have some way of standardizing what we're doing, then someone's gonna go find someone who's gonna sign off on something for us to hand over.
Right.
It's gonna happen.
They're gonna do that if we have standards anyway, Ryan.
I
hate to tell you.
completely agree, so
Yeah.
that's where I like where Goshen is working with their LE over there. And I'm not asking ours to do, but I mean,
I am.
and if that's a possibility, I would say.
There's things that and trainings that we will have to
Yeah,
do together, and that's just gonna have to happen regardless if you're gonna put rules in place, right? One of those is gonna be that training with law enforcement, I think that has to happen to get everybody safe. As far as training each individual person,
I mean,
don't know that
that's
we-
something lots of law enforcement agencies aren't doing currently because they're concerned about the liability on their
Right, cause if
selves.
you train me, Dave, and I do something stupid,
Yeah, you can say, well,
yeah, I'm
Dave
getting sued,
got
you're
me.
getting sued, you know, it's.
But I see it both ways, because wouldn't you guys like to know that my training is gonna
Yeah, it would be
correspond to your
nice.
training?
Sure.
Yeah.
To where we're working together, not
There's a
working against each other.
consistency.
Yes.
What do you say, Doug? 'Cause I-
I
The
think
reality, here's what's gonna happen, there's gonna be a cottage industry, and it's gonna consist of peace officers that are trained and say, I have some free time that I'm willing to build this little company in this area and train, and it's gonna be a little cottage, I can see that happening, and they won't get rich, but they can make some extra spending money and they can feel good about what they're gonna do, and it's gonna dovetail into what they're doing. That's the reality of what's gonna happen in this situation. At least from my perspective. And it may even happen in Wheeland. I mean, peace officers retire and they may say, you know, I'd like to do this. I can make a little money on the side and then I can hire a couple police officers on their days off if they wanna do it, to help me with it, so that I think is gonna be the reality of it.
And I think my last comment, again, I am for training. I would love to see something standardized or something where we're working with our own law enforcement so we know what we're doing as a group. But I do have an issue with setting the bar so high to where, I mean, I work year round, so if we set it to 30 hours or 40 hours, now I gotta figure out how I can squeeze that training in. But what is the board's expectation of if I decide not to do it? How do I protect the students that I'm around when something does happen? And by setting that bar so high, which again, I wanna be safe. I've been around guns my entire life. I am pretty confident I can do whatever qualifications we need. But I don't want to basically be handcuffed behind my back because I couldn't find the time to get the 30 hours in.
It's no different than lawyers and other professionals. If you wanna do something and you need that continuing education, I have to take time off to do that. I have to take weekends off to do that. That's just a choice.
But that's your profession.
And if you're gonna protect kids, you've made that determination.
But you guys are expecting us to protect kids. I could turn and run. I mean, I have
I'm not
no
asking you
issue
to be
with
a
that.
concealed carry person at all.
No,
I'm just
And I'm
saying
not
if you're
saying
doing
that,
this, this is what you have to do.
but what I am saying is any other person can come in off the street and cause a problem. But if I turn and run, I guarantee something is gonna happen to me because I didn't try to protect the students that were around me.
I'm staying with what I just said. I may get voted against it, but that's the minimum.
I think I agree with Ryan on pretty much everything he said. There's not much I don't do with guns, from reloading to long range, I shoot so much, and I'm all for training. I think it'd be foolish not to have something put in place for training. But on the side, when you start talking 60 hours and the different costs and everything, I don't have 60 hours, if I do it, it's family time, but between my different jobs, so trying to set the bar too high is gonna make it really hard for the guys to actually meet that, but on the same token, I don't wanna set it too low where, the truth of the matter is, if somebody's even willing to do some training, most of the time, anyone that's not to do the training, if you don't really want them to carry the gun, I guess is kind of what I'm, if they're to be willing to jump through hoops to do it, most likely they're to be halfway responsible anyway, so, that's my 2 cents, I'm all for training, just that standard one of what we're going for, if it's an 8-hour, I've been to different ones and there's so many different options, so I think there has to be a standard of what you want the employees to do on that side, but
So the model had suggested 16 hours of live round and 8 of scenario training. Just clarifying. Does that seem more doable, or is that still a constraint for your family time and? I'm just asking questions.
no matter what, I'm not gonna outdo whatever you guys ask. To me, I'm a firm believer in it, so if you tell me to do 60 hours, I'll find a way to do 60 hours, but it's gonna take away from everything else in my life but
So Doug's suggestion was 46. Well, initially 30 and then 16 each year. So what's the 60 hours that?
I thought somebody.
That Albany County.
Albany County's the one that went 60.
Oh, okay, I was just
Yeah.
trying to figure out where you pulled the 60 out.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was in the newspapers and stuff.
Yeah.
That's a big deal.
Yeah, if you make it,
was requiring nothing, I thought I saw.
No, Albany
I
County.
don't know.
But Laramie, just Cheyenne, right?
Yeah, I don't think
Laramie
Cheyenne
County,
is,
They're not gonna do any kind of policy.
last I saw the news now.
so which still means that their teachers can carry, they just don't have any rules in place.
Yeah, so they don't have to.
Because that's what will happen if we don't propose a rule, then teachers can carry, staff.
Still have to, work out the logistics of the lock boxes and whatever they're doing, right?
Not if you don't have
Not
a
if you
rule.
don't have
Not if you
rules.
don't have a
Oh.
rule.
Oh, okay,
Yeah.
well, that's interesting. There's a
Yeah,
new,
so we can just let it ride and do nothing. And then the state law takes effect on July 1. And anybody, including employees, staff, volunteer, can carry on school grounds. If they have a legally, Wyoming concealed permit. The rule is just, do we want to make sure that the people in our district at least have some sort of training?
I wonder if they'll, over time, I'm just thinking out loud, I wonder if over time, the state of Wyoming will realize that maybe they should have put a few more suggestions, I don't know, you know, cause over time, it seems like we would not be the only school district kind of grappling with, well, what do we do? Should it be this, should it be that, should we not do anything? It just feels like there's not a lot of structure or guidance here.
Because the law literally says the district may,
Right.
it doesn't
Which
say,
local control is not a bad thing,
It-
but it
it's-
is pretty,
it's very.
we don't understand what.
And the districts they're all over the board.
That's what I've been able to
Yeah.
ascertain is
Some
that-
are doing nothing. Powell was the most recent that decided they are not gonna implement a rule. Some Albany County, 60 hours, and they went so far as to try to, you know, put stuff in there that you know is gonna get battled in court, because literally all we can do is tell our staff how many hours training they have to have.
Something will get done when a child gets killed.
Well, that's not good enough for me.
Well, I know, that's the way these
Yeah,
things
I
work.
don't, I mean, and
I
nobody
think
has
this-
a crystal ball,
Yeah.
but you know, it's like.
I think there's gonna be a lot of lawsuits, and I hope and pray that doesn't happen, but just
There's never
people,
been a school shooting in this state, has there?
Yeah, there was one over on the, almost over in Cokeville.
Coca.
What I'm trying to prevent is that our staff, those people that conceal carry, aren't the ones that shoot the kid. So they don't panic, and I think that's what Clay's point is, that we get them to a point where somehow they don't panic and they're not the ones that shoot the child.
Even accidentally, yeah.
And I'm more worried about that than anything.
okay, any last call for comments?
That's good thoughts.
Lots to take in. So again, if you're watching this at home, please get in touch with your school board members. We really need to know what the public thinks. And this is not the last of this topic. Thank you guys all for coming. See you Monday night at the board meeting.